Good afternoon, everybody. Maybe for some of you, it's good morning. For us here in Bulgaria, it's good evening, and for Europe as well. We're covering quite a lot of time zones with this e-conference, and I'm seeing such a huge presence here already. So many people jumping on the session. I'm very thankful for this. I promise it's going to be interesting. So while everybody is still joining, just a few words about session itself. As I called it, supporting students in an uncertain higher education landscape. I drafted this title in the beginning of January. And it's a session that is both for this conference and it was for the previous MENA one that took place in the past 2 days. But I have to say that the conversations, the preliminary conversations that I have with the current speakers have been very different from the session I had with the speakers for the MENA e-conference, mostly because the MENA region right now is just torn by the conflict that erupted there. So when we talk about uncertainties in the Gulf, this was mostly the topic discussed there, how counselors are supporting their students and the parents in times of conflict. But when I met with our speakers here, our discussion was way more philosophical. I'd rather say more into mental health, well-being, communication with parents. So these are some of the topics that we are going to cover today. As always, I have my questions prepared with me. First, I'd like to present our panel, starting with Eva Reichenbach from CBS International Business School in Germany, followed by Andrea Coupe, an IC from the US, and Eugenia Figueroa, a counselor from St. Joseph Mary School in Uruguay, and Lucas Sousa. Lucas, sorry that you're last, but you're the gentleman, so ladies first. A counselor from Beacon School in Brazil. So I want to start straight away. Right now I have on my screen Andrea, Eugenia, Eva, and Lucas. But Eva, I've got some questions for specifically prepared for you as a uni rep. So I'm going to try to follow this order of people on my screen. But I'd like to start with the very basic question, so to say, to frame uncertainty. So when we talk about uncertainty in higher education today, what does that actually mean in your context? And has that changed in recent years, or has it been always present? Andrea, let's start with you.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here today, hoping to be helpful. For me, in this context, I've been an IEC for over 25 years. And that means I've interacted with over 75 different high schools. That's where the students were attending. So uncertainty has been a normal part of my job all the time. But right now, it means to me that I need to be a source of practical answers, often in very complex situations. The trending for my work has been a lot more emotional, and layers are within questions. There's more deeper questions that I sometimes need to deal with. It has expanded into every corner. And I'll just say that I counter uncertainty with a motto. I just deal with it as control what you can control. And when my students or families are stressed, I give them assignments and get them busy researching colleges and universities. That's just a natural next step.
Sorry. Eugenia, how is it for you? How do you frame uncertainty in your context?
Well, truth be told, I think uncertainty has always been there. It's part of life. And it has always been part of life for students and for us as educators and as counselors. I think that, however, uncertainty has shifted over the last few years in the sense that we are now seeing more degrees, more opportunities for students, in different parts of the world now that we are becoming more and more globalized. So we're seeing a structural and informational change in uncertainty, especially because of how much information our students have to handle at the same time. The university rankings, social media advice, university influencers, AI generated information can also lead to misinformation. So we are seeing that uncertainty is shifting and it's becoming more globalized based on something that is quite paradoxical. We have more options, but students that have a harder time making decisions based on those options.
That's why I never unmute myself. Lucas, on to you.
Great, yeah. Well, thank you for having me. It's such an interesting topic. I couldn't agree more. Uncertainty has always been present. Of course, now we talk about wars, political scenarios, which are specific contextual facts. But all in all, the way we frame it, or at least I always like to share with my students, is openness to learning. So something that excites me about what we do is being open to learning because things are changing all the time. But of course, as Andrea and Eugenia said, breaking that into steps and control what you can control helps, especially post-pandemic. We're very anxious as a whole. So anxiety can be a way that we usually deal with it is breaking into smaller steps. But of course, change is there. We cannot ignore the fact that AI, as Eugenia said, is here. There's demographic changes, of course, as well. Latin American families are having less kids. There are contexts specific to the world as well. For example, Europe is on the rise. More students applying to European universities with the political scenario in the US. So yeah, growth and declines, mental health is key. But as a whole, openness to learning, that's what I share with my students, to being adaptable to change.
I'm gonna come back to teaching being adaptable in a bit. First, let me move on to Viva. Eva, just so to make it clear, you're not just part of the admissions, you're also working with the students who are doing their foundation year. So you have pretty good communication with the students at CBS. So can you tell us for your students and in your context, what's their uncertainty? What does it look like?
So thank you, first of all, for also inviting me to speak today. And well, in this case, it is, you can see that uncertainty never stops. Yeah. So even if they have taken the first step to come into university, in my case, in some cases also for preparatory courses, then they might, let's say, feel relieved for a moment to be in this certain situation for a while. And after they have finished their foundations and they're actually able to, you know, to proceed to other universities, get other ideas while they are in a new country, then they realize, okay, it is starting again. But you can feel a certain, let's say, decision about this as well, because in that moment they have a choice. They do have a choice of either staying in a rather secured environment where they are in that moment, or to proceed to maybe other universities where they have to make decisions again, where they have to choose subjects again, where they have to find new friends, new accommodations, new environment. So I do strongly believe that it is important for them to be aware that uncertainty is part of it and it will always be there, but it will have its ups and downs. And in the downs they need, or in the ups, they need to be prepared for, you know, acting flexible and finding their own strategies how to deal with it the best possible way.
Thank you. And you all mentioned things like AI and changing job markets. And nowadays, we often hear the students today face this unprecedented uncertainty because of these things. But do you see this as fundamentally new challenge or more of an evolution of what has always existed there? And I'm asking this because when I was at high school, it was just the time when Wikipedia showed up and everybody was saying, now that we have Wikipedia, we wouldn't have to do research anymore. We wouldn't need books anymore. We wouldn't need encyclopedias anymore. And students would just type everything out of Wikipedia, but this didn't happen. So is today's unprecedented uncertainty in terms of the AI and job market real, or is it a bit overrated? Andrea, what do you think? You,
I, you taught me well. For me, I looked at this idea that your question pretty seriously, and I've decided to look at it as fundamentally a new challenge. I think framing it that way reacts to what parents have fundamentally changed over the last few years. They want more hands-on experiences and resume building activities. To them, they're equating that with the value of a college education. So they want to know that paid, guaranteed internships are part of a degree path, which we all know doesn't exist everywhere. I'm all about the global citizen skill building. And so I turn into this flexible, adaptable mindset that we're all on board with, and tell them uncomfortable can be exciting. And I do recommend to my families, my parents usually read The Upside of Stress. It's a book by Kelly McGonigal, a Stanford professor a few years back, wrote it. And it reframes stress as this exciting part of life.
so stress is exciting. Thank you. That really relieves me. Eugenia, how do you find this? Do you think that it's really an unprecedented uncertainty, or is it just an involvement of the world?
It's a little bit of both. I mean, it is unprecedented because this is the first time that we have these models and they are readily available for everyone. But it is also part of the evolution of where we were headed and where we're going to continue heading towards. So I couldn't agree more with Andrea. I agree with everything that she just said. It is an opportunity. So this happened when the internet became popularized, when Wikipedia became popularized, as you said. And now we're talking about AI, but there are skills and competencies that are fundamentally human that no model can even replicate, least of all take over. So there are things that we can, only us human beings can do. And that I think is what gives hope to our students when they feel down because they don't know if this degree that they're studying or this career that they're pursuing, if it will exist in a few years or if it will be taken over by AI. It's okay, but you have a skill set that is uniquely yours, uniquely human, and that you can apply elsewhere. Adaptability, I think, is the name of the game in this case.
Yeah, adaptability has been greatly discussed in the past few days as well. I'm gonna move on to Lucas. Lucas, just your opinion on this. Is it a new thing or has it always been there?
Pretty much aligned. So as Eugenia said, a bit of both. In our case, in our context, I saw a father delivering a session about his career in law, how things had changed. And that was very interesting during a career day that we usually set up for students. And he predicted that the career of being a lawyer is going to be impacted by AI severely. And then gave us a lot of food for thought. And then actually what changes is during our reflection, the research pillar, because we usually follow two main pillars, self-awareness plus research of options. I think Andrea mentioned that. We usually give tasks for students and parents to do their own homework doing research, and that adds up to that. So how is the career of a lawyer turning into something different? So that adds more layers to the research pillar of how are things going to be like. But yeah, it's navigating, feeling comfortable with the uncertainty. Pretty much adds up to the research pillar of options. Because, for example, as he said, when he started back in the 80s, lawyers wouldn't even have computers. Then they had computers. Now with AI, things are simplified. But so it adds up to the research pillar.
Thank you. And Eva, let me bring you in here from the university perspective. So are you seeing some changes in how students approach applications today? Are they becoming themselves more uncertain, more strategic, more risk averse?
So generally, when it comes to that, I would say that students are, if you can put it down to that, are faster overwhelmed in the sense of um, able or not able to structure themselves better, you know. So for example, if there's a lot of information being asked from them, it is a lot overwhelming. If there's a long email, it is required to read that email to the end. And that's going back to what the other said before, the skill set, right? So no matter how the development is around us, as long as they have the proper skill set to be able to react to this when it comes to situations such as university applications, where I need to be very precise about what I'm doing, where I should, you know, make sure that there's no mistake in it, where I have to explain myself the proper way, and then being able to use, you know, all the AI and all to help me doing all that. This is a great idea to actually involve it, which then helps me to be less overwhelmed, less anxious about the whole situation of applying to universities, being, you know, pushed to the situation of all of a sudden talking to universities. It's about your future. It's a big decision, a big step that they have to take, with many opportunities out there. And I believe if they have the skill set, they combine it with AI, they do have a really high chance of reducing this anxiousness and all that comes with it. Because at the same time, I do think they are there to take risks. Otherwise, they would always go for the safest option that is maybe in their hometown, simply around them, where they can stay with family, where they have their social environment, where they do not have to get themselves out of the comfort zone. But then that risk, of course, also comes with anxiousness and overwhelmment if I don't prepare myself accordingly.
Thank you, Eva. I want to move on to the topic of student and parent dynamics and probably start with Lucas, because during our prep meeting, Lucas mentioned something, and you mentioned it now as well, demographics, changes in population, families moving from having 3, 4 kids to having 1 kid, and questioning the return of investment in education of their child. So how much do you think of the student uncertainty is actually influenced by the parents, and what trends are you seeing in the parental involvement?
The tricky question. Families. So let's talk about parents. Demographics is a fact. So if you read the World Economic Forum, or if you look into statistics, and that's very important actually for the university side. So Latin America is having fewer kids. When we look at generations previous and now, still a growing region when it comes to the amount of kids, but decreasing with time. But then you look at Nigeria, for example, growing, India growing. So there are other parts of the world also that, demographically speaking, are expected to have more kids. Having said that, in terms of trends, we see parents more open to learn how to raise their kids. So it's very typical now at schools to have sessions with parents on how to raise their kids. But at the same time, that also leads to the point of parents that it's what we call helicopter parents, right? So sometimes you have parents that are over present or over demanding. Of course, that at the end of the day, I'm not sure if it was Andrea, Eugenia, or Eugenia, someone said, at the end of the day, we all want what's the best for the kid. So with pressure not over the school, what we try to share is the parents. We try to understand their concerns. Why are they putting extra pressure sometimes? Sometimes not. They're being absent, so you got to check. But at the end of the day, they want whatever is best for their kid. We also want whatever is best for the kid, being a student-centered school, for example. So what we share is we educate the community, and in some context, I'm sure Eugenia knows, for example, in Latin America, there is lack of awareness of how things work. So sometimes, for example, next week I'm delivering a session to explain to parents about what we do. So educating the community also leads to more information, less anxiety. So kids are more anxious, parents are more anxious, we are more anxious, many people are more anxious, but at the end of the day, if you give people tools and educate, then there is less pressure as well. That's my point.
Thank you, Lucas. And Eugenia, how do you feel with the parents and the pressure? Where do you stay with the parents and the pressure that they um, influence, the way they influence their children?
So I agree with Lucas there, where, information is key, and information is what will liberate the parents, the students, and all of us involved. So we're seeing nowadays in primary, and we see the effects of that in secondary school, overstructured childhoods where, everything is heavily controlled, where the adults, the parents are the ones solving all the problems for the kids. The kids don't solve problems by themselves. They don't know how to handle frustration. Everything is overmanaged by the parents. And this is where, high schools in particular would become quite important, because we have what we call the hidden curriculum of high school, right? Where we teach students how to self-regulate, how to manage their time, how to take initiative, how to handle frustration. So we need to work with the parents and with the students in order to manage their anxieties and their expectations as well, not just their anxieties, but also their expectations, because it seems like every decision that we're asking these kids to make by the time they're 15, 16 years old is high stakes. If you make a mistake in this decision, then everything is going to fall apart and everything will collapse and your life will be completely ruined, which is not the case. And we know it's not the case, but they feel that it is, right? So we need to help parents and students navigate uncertainty from different places. We will not address the parents the same way that we do the kids, but let's just not focus so much on the terrible, horrible things that we think are going to happen if we make the wrong decision, but actually focus on what we know, what we can handle, what we can control. Do we know the university? What's its ranking? The kid is not going to be falling apart or falling behind if they take a foundation program first before they attempt something long term. So we're carrying a lot of anxiety, but that's part of what we do.
Maybe it all comes from the idea that parents don't want kids to make the same mistakes, but you need to
Exactly.
go through your own mistakes. Yeah. Andrea, what's your position on this question? And then I'll move on to Eva.
Well, I agree, Eugenia and Lucas, the idea of unrealistic expectations. Over the last 5 years or so, the great inflation, especially since the pandemic, fuels the hopes of some of these unrealistic expectations in our conversations. I feel it's just right when a teenager is starting to learn agency, building some of those skills Eva was talking about. The parent steps in and wants to protect their child from the risks that will build that resilience. So some of the university acceptances end up being a little too much for the parents and less focused at times on the student. Perhaps that has to do with the parent's financial plan for college as well. I'm aware of that. But I purposely build a college list from the foundation up. I force the conversations to be about things we haven't heard about so that they have to research, and I explain more about that in sessions. But unrealistic expectations are part of growing up too.
Thank you, Andrea. And Eva, when you work with your students, they're already at university, so they already have some idea of what they're doing. But how do you help them build agency? You mentioned it, Andrea mentioned as well. How do you help them make decisions for themselves rather than reacting to pressures?
Yes. So pretty much what we do with them is try to break down their thoughts. Yeah. Oftentimes when they are really overwhelmed, where they're just in a situation where they're making passive decisions in a way to say, okay, this is a safe choice. This is what I can do. Sometimes they simply need someone that organizes their thoughts. Yeah, that is also something AI might be able to do, but not in a very reflected way, to organize their thoughts of saying, let's look at the bigger picture. who are you? What do you want? What is actually your goal for the future? How can you deal with certain things? What is what are your goals pretty much in order to be able to build all that? And how can you at the end of the day build that agency so that making a decision for you feels good, that you're able to know in which direction to walk into? And so this is what we do. We do talk to the students and try to not influence them, but guide them throughout the process. Pretty much what the counselors are also doing in the high school. Give them new ideas of where they can start, for example, to do further research, to work on themselves. Again, the skills.
Eva glitched a little bit. Okay, let's move on with the next question. If she doesn't return, she will return at some point. But a few times we mentioned adaptability, something the students need to learn. And I'm just curious, how do you actually learn to be adaptable when you're 16, 17, 18 years old? And I'd like to hear it from the counselors in your point of view. Eugenia, for instance, how do you teach your students to be adaptable?
Oh, that's the key, right? I mean, there is no recipe for it in the sense that no one way of approaching this will help all students, because we're all different and we all have our own learning style. But one of the things that we try to do is to move the conversation from extrinsic factors to intrinsic factors. So instead of thinking, okay, what university do I want to attend, which is out there, right? It's not my own thing. It's a university out there. Okay, what is my learning style? What kind of learner am I? What kind of problems do I want to solve? What environment helps me thrive, so that we can look at different options instead of just thinking about something that is out there. Another thing that we do is we want students to be autonomous and to be competent. So that involves making mistakes, learning from them, and correcting them. Because we usually stop short in the second step, right? Okay, we make the mistake, we correct it, and then what do we do with it? And that's the important part. We need to be able to correct that, start over, do the same thing a million times until we get it right, so that we know how to handle frustration, so that we know that we are competent. We will eventually get there. One of the things that we do quite a lot for all subjects is having reflective writing about their learning preferences, what they have learned with this activity, things that they can improve, planning a pathway for improvement throughout the year when we notice the weaknesses, when we can diagnose the weaknesses. We attend the universities here in Uruguay, and instead of asking the students, is this the degree that you would like to study? We ask them, can you envision yourself here? Does this excite you? Or is it something that you go like, okay, mom told me I had to go into medicine, so I guess this is going to be the university for me. We have a lot of informational interviews with professionals, with people who have studied this, that, or the other degree, so that students can hear firsthand what it is all about and the different options that they have. We expose them to as much information as we can, and we then ask them to do something with that. Instead of simply passively receiving all this information, to actively envision themselves, see themselves there, take an internship if they can, work during the summer, which is pretty common here in Uruguay when they're teenagers, so that they can put all of those things into practice.
Thank you, Eugenia. Eva, just to give you some light, we are discussing how you teach adaptability to students. So, Lucas, what are your tricks in teaching your students how to be adaptable?
Some similar tools that we have here at Beacon, similarly to Eugenia. Pretty much, we're privileged to have the university and career counseling throughout 4 years. So what we do pretty much is, when it comes to reflecting, we try to make it natural that mistakes will happen. So, for example, there's one specific activity that I had with all of my students from grade 9 to grade 12 a month ago that AI created, by the way, that there are scenarios and then the students have to react to things that might happen, and then they got to come up with solutions. So using drilling with scenarios can be a way for them to understand that life will not be a straight line, but actually with ups and downs, right? But more than that, as Eugenia said, also during our career day, we make sure we have professionals that transitioned throughout their career. So, because the World Economic Forum again predicts that we are going to change our career at least once in our lifetime, even if it's within one field. But so therefore, we make sure during the conferences that we have professionals who change their careers so that they understand it's not a decision it's not written on stone, but actually it's what we call a first decision based on a lot of information, research that they did, a lot of self-awareness tools that they received. Internships also help a lot for those schools that do not have work shadowing or job shadowing yet. We are we've been doing that for 4 years now, and it's been very helpful. So whenever students are immersed in an environment, even if it's for 2 weeks, they can come back and say, well, I call the power of the no. So I didn't like a law firm, so I don't want to do that. That's also part of the decision. So immersing yourself so that you're going to have tools to make a decision that helps. And of course, making it very relative that throughout life, we're reflecting about what we're doing with our lives.
Thank you, Lucas. Andrea, I'd like to twist the question a little bit for you, because apart from the students, you're also meeting with a lot of the parents. And in the times of when they're uncertain, I guess you also should teach the parents adaptability. How do you present to the parents the notion that they should be adaptable?
I actually have a technique I use. I'm not meaning it in a tricky way, but I like to ask a parent in the presence of the student to talk about their first job. And this one example, this man said, I dug ditches. And the student sitting next to me rolled his eyes. He said, I've heard that all my life. Yeah. And that man now owns an insurance company. He's not digging ditches anymore. But when I make it a little more relatable, where it breaks like Eugenia was talking about, this high stakes emotional level in the room, in a lighthearted way, we can break it down a bit. I also, with a student in front of the parents, this is how I knew millennials changed to Gen Z. Literally, I don't know where I decided I was going to major in millennial or major in Gen Z. Well, I always asked millennial, how do you keep track of your life? Because I knew I needed them to keep track of me in our meetings. And they would talk about paper and calendars, and they always threw the mom in somehow. And Gen Z had no answer. It was dead silent for a long time. And so I tackle in front of parents some of these daily issues that build a lot of anxiety and stress. And they need to see that there are practical how-tos. And sure, I'll use AI to come up with a great list of those, right?
I just realized that maybe my 52-year-old husband is a Gen Z because he has never used a calendar in his life or an agenda. Eva, from your position at university, do you find that the students coming to CBS are prepared to face challenges and changes in their pathways?
Actually, not so much as an overall. So what you can say, of course, students that come to us, especially international students, they have already been through a lot, right? They made all these decisions that you're talking about. They've been through all these situations, through the talks with the parents, with the counselors, and the ups and downs as well. At the same time, what I mentioned before, many things simply don't stop, and they are faced with new challenges day by day, coming from a high school perspective, all of a sudden being in a university environment. They have to understand that, you know, a university environment requires different skills of them. Some of them learned in high school, some of them did not learn or did not focus so much on in high school. And that usually hits them really hard in a way. So the students in that moment are getting often overloaded, you know, in a way, and it is also our job to help them break it down, organize themselves, restructure themselves. So what we often do is do again study skills workshops for them. So you would think they already finished 12 or 13 years of education, and they should know by now how to study for an exam and how to organize themselves. And you realize, no, they don't. And if it worked for them in a certain system, it usually doesn't work in a new system. So it is also our task as universities to, no matter where that university is specifically, no matter where it is, because in that sense, even different countries have different requirements for that. The students need to learn how to restructure themselves, how to learn new skills, and how to adapt to this new environment.
This point that you made, in my experience as a counselor, I had lots of students that we discussed, for instance, going to study in the UK, but actually what they mean is just London, and for them UK is just London. And I thought this to be very, very narrow-minded, but do you think it's about being narrow-minded, or is it a preservation practice of not choosing to go somewhere where you actually don't know anything about? So why do you feel that students tend to focus on this limited number of default destinations in universities, and how do you encourage your students to stay more open to different countries and institutions and even other nonlinear pathways? Eugenia?
That happens quite a lot here because, you know, students know what they know and they don't know what they don't know. Sorry, so they think about Europe, Western Europe mostly, the US, Canada, and that's about it, right? So they don't know what they don't know. In that sense, we have to first start thinking about what's the best fit for the students and have them take a look at, explore, read about, see loads of pictures and videos. That helps quite a lot of other options, other places, demystify some places because there are certain preconceived notions that our students have that we're going to need to take a sledgehammer to and see if we can actually reconfigure what they're thinking. So it takes time, it takes patience, it takes working with the kids and the students, showing them what it is all about, showing different options. But again, I think the lack of information is our worst enemy in that sense. Because when they don't know other places, when they don't know that there are other options, when they don't have the opportunity to see firsthand these options, to have contact with these options, that's why they're so narrow-minded. I find it that when they start seeing other opportunities, when they start seeing other options, when they start understanding how other places work, they are willing to take those options.
Thank you, Eugenia. And Lucas, do you have this situation with your students?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So as Eugenia said, sharing information. One strategy, I don't know, I suppose there are a couple of councils, but also a lot of university reps among us. One strategy is we started expanding the amount of universities present at our university fairs. We're now offering 120 options. That can feel like a lot, but then we teach a month before on how to choose university, and the students have to filter among the universities present at the fair a list that they're going to talk to, so that they are in touch more with more options. But also adding up to that, for those universities that do not offer summer programs yet, please do. At least in our context, we have 84 to 92 kids going abroad and spending 1, 2, 3 weeks to have a taste. So as Eugenia said, once they know, they're more familiar, they are more inclined to go. And that's more common in the US. Europe doesn't offer as many options, although it's growing. Thank you for those who are offering that. So to give you an example, a student attended a summer program in Amsterdam and opened the door, like he went to Amsterdam. Now, also something more common to Latin American students is once there is one, there will be more. So usually we work with a community, a sense of community. So a strategy also for the reps is connect the student with a student from that nationality that is on campus. So once they know that there will be people from their nationality there, at least for Latin America, we will go more. So that's a trend, for example, with Spain. So whenever trying to recruit, if you try to find, because sometimes you might think, oh, they're coming here not for their national peers, but to connect with others. Yes, but there's a sense of comfort whenever we see our peers as well. So yeah, those are some strategies and reflections when it comes to trying to expand to different destinations. And for counselors, is also educating. I just got to know in one of these conferences last time more options, like in Denmark, and then I shared with my students. So also, it's a whole continuous education process for us as well.
Thank you. And Andrea, how do you fight not just the students' narrow-mindedness, but also the parents' one? Because I get that the parents are also a bit narrow-minded when it comes to destinations and degrees as well.
Oh, yes, I referred to the idea that the parents had a plan that they already figured out worked for them. I do think that that adaptable transition, preparing a student to be ready to thrive where Eva is wanting them. I'll give a shout out to David Gee. He gave his early bird session this morning, and it is recorded. He echoed everything they need to know there's a whole plan to get a job later. And there's a gap of where can I be successful? So I'm in a position where I can help them strategically imagine what that looks like. And then who will you be in 10 years and working back? Or I'll give them an interview question that they might be asked in 10 years. And it says, what is something you did in high school that you think prepared you for this job today? And I want them to look back and say that experience and Eugenia's awesome setup, Luca's interactions, talking with someone who transitioned in their job. I want some of those formative experiences to ignite them and give them a little courage, which will build some of that self-confidence. And then be open to more possibilities.
Thank you. And Eva, building on that, if you can give us some institutional insights on how you're working to attract and support students and families, even from less traditional or emerging markets.
Yes, so what we can see is that it is always important for them simply to, let's say, build connection, have someone to talk to, and get transparent answers. Yeah, so they usually, when students, families, and all approach us, whether it is about studying in Germany or in any other destination, they are figuring out their options. So the same way they might look into Germany or in one specific university, they might have 5 countries on their screen as well as 20 universities connected to that. And it is important for them to understand, what do you get here? What can you expect? What are, let's say, the pros and cons, but to also figure out together what is important for the student. So some students would heavily focus on the destination and say, I would like to go to Germany, no matter what, this is my destination, let's say, or to the US or some other country. Then you ask them, okay, why? And then it slowly comes, yeah, because I would like to, let's take the example, work in the car industry, and I always dreamed of being an engineer, and that's why Germany is my destination. Okay, then we're slowly getting towards the subject where we can talk about, okay, then your major goal is not necessarily Germany, it's actually becoming an engineer, and you do think that your chances rise here in Germany, for example. So I do think that an open communication, a communication where all sides are trying to find the best solution for the student, while the student still is able to make their own decision, is the best way to do this, as well as looking at hard factors. Hard factors in terms of, for many, it is financials, especially when we talk about the big study destinations. The second part is visas, of course, depending on where they're from, especially from emerging countries. And then, of course, the opportunities that are waiting for them after graduating. What about job? Are they planning to actually go back to their countries? Does a degree from a certain country higher their chances because they might have studied in English or a different language? Or are they planning to stay within the country? All those are factors that that the student at least needs to have an idea to be able to make a good decision. And that's how we try to support them.
Thank you, Eva. Somehow we only have 15 minutes left. I don't know how time flies, but that's why I want to move on to the topic of information overload and how it actually piles on the uncertainty. Nowadays, we have so many channels of information to get information about universities, degrees, careers, and so on and so forth. Tools, variety of tools, rankings, AI, ChatGPT, and so on and so forth. And at some point, I feel like all of this information that we have access to actually piles on the uncertainty, and it sometimes provides wrong information. So in this world, how do you help students and families identify the trustworthy sources and make the decisions they feel confident in? Lucas, I'm going to start with you this time.
Amazing. I love that question. Well, we got to bear in mind that these students are going to become young adults who are going to start working and living their lives, and they got to, or we expect them to know on how to identify reliable sources. And then the curriculum we have, the IB, helps with that because it stimulates, encourages students to think critically all the time throughout. And there are plenty of sources, plenty of options now available, especially with AI. It is always knowing how to check the information. So developing students critically so that they can understand the difference between facts. So that's how at schools we're very interconnected. And then I rely a lot on, I love a class called Theory of Knowledge when students talk about the importance of science, for example. But anyways, so we work in an interconnected way. However, we also give them reliable tools, like we have an official platform to do research of options of careers in universities. That also helps. But other than that, the school adopts one certain kind of package that leads to one specific AI that we kind of feel more confident with how reliable the information being put there is. So all in all, but we cannot escape from the fact that students are still going to have access to multiple sources, and they got to think that critically. When it comes to rankings, for example, I love to open the ranking to show them the criteria, but let's check the criteria that this ranking has. Is it the amount of citations in papers? Is it employer reputation? And I love when the student raises the question, but how do they measure the employer reputation? Said, well, I love that. So is it based on Forbes? Is that based on something specific? So when the student is critical enough to raise the questions, I have goosebumps and I feel proud of what we do. Yeah.
Thank you, Lucas. And Eugenia?
Well, in our case, our market is a little different here in Uruguay. So we do all of the heavy lifting ourselves, right? We see a lot of information asymmetry as well, in the sense that, again, students know what they know. So we see a lot of information on Ivy League, universities. We see, the high stakes universities are the ones that they immediately think about because they are the ones that they know because of publicity, advertising, marketing, whatever. But they don't know about all the other hundreds, thousands of excellent universities that offer what they want to study in the environment that they want to do it, but they're not as well known. So we start there. Who are you? What do you want from life? What do you expect? Where do you see yourself? Let's practice. Let's go into internships. Let's have a summer job. Let's do all of these things so that we can have an idea. They're still in moratorium, obviously, because they're still figuring out who they are. Their identities have not yet been completely defined, but let's see who you are, and based on that, let's try to find what the best fit is, even if that means that I will have to help you filter all of this information overload, and I'll have to sit next to you, and we're going to have to take 3 or 4 very deep breaths because we're going to be overwhelmed. And we're going to have to start looking, as Lucas was saying, at, okay, how are these rankings made and what are they looking at? Is this something that aligns with your values and your needs and your wants? Or is this ranking useful for you? Or would you like to take a look at other metrics and other parameters? And we struggle because, again, students know what they know and they don't know what they don't know. We struggle with the university as a system of status. So I'm choosing this university because it will make me look better, or it will give me a certain social status that I don't have right now, and the recognition of the university itself, not of what they want to do. So we struggle with that as well. That's why I think it is important for universities to actually show themselves, to show what they do, to mark their presence in some markets that have long been forgotten, but there is an interest. So it's navigating all of these things with them. It's a bit more cumbersome. It takes a little bit more time, but it's fascinating to do it with the students and their parents.
Thank you, Eugenia. And Andrea, do you also have this problem of students being overwhelmed by information? How do you tackle it?
The obvious answer is yes. On a very practical note, I'll just give you a couple ways I bring it down. I remind them, you have your plan. It might not look exactly like everyone else's plan. And I also tell them not to talk about their list with a lot of other people. It is normal to change your mind. I ask them, when's the last time you changed your mind? And, that gives them a little more freedom to be open to some of these ideas Eugenia and Lucas were talking about. I ask them, what's already on your long list? And I don't always get all the answers. They have ideas, but I use that blank space in their response to tell them why I love an international idea and being a global citizen. It's just really helpful for where I see them in 5 or 10 years in that interview. But I think the decision to go to a particular college will benefit from what Eugenia was just describing of being alongside. And it can be done in a group and in a workshop. I've done that. But yeah, overwhelmed, there are possibilities if we quiet ourselves a bit.
Thank you. And Ivan, one question for you. When you accept the students and they come to you, do they have enough information and the right information about what to expect from university and what's going to happen there? Or are they a bit in a limbo and not well prepared?
I would always say they do have some expectations, but it's probably different than reality looks like. So usually what I tell students before searching university, if they have the chance, of course, depending on how far it is, that's why I also agreed to Lucas' summer school idea. Go to university and get an idea of what is expected of you. Yet I tell them every university will be different. Every experience will be different. The whole setting, the setup of a university is different. The subject is different. The friends you might make. Some people might have a really good experience because maybe they have folks of the same nationality, the people they can speak the same language with. Others might feel very alone. So it very much also depends on the student in that sense. But at the end of the day, expectations, or let's say what the students think it will look like, and then it is different. Nevertheless, what I like to prepare them for is that different doesn't have to be worse. So of course, this is about, making new experiences, getting out of their comfort zone, especially if they study in an international context. And that this is something not negative, that they simply have to see it as a way of acquiring new skills, of growing in a way and making new experiences. And what I also wanted to add is actually in opposite to what Andrea is doing, I do tell the students to talk to others about their choices, because from what I could see at least is that one thing is all the information out there, and you talked about what is good information, what is bad information. But at the end of the day, an information or an experience, someone tells you this is how it has been for me. This is, that I feel at least is something that the students always rely to. And that is why I often hear when they say, how did you find this? Why do you want to do this? I saw it on TikTok. Okay, that doesn't mean that TikTok is the most reliable source. But if we're talking about AI, if we're talking about all this, why do students choose TikTok? Because there is actually a person, someone telling them how their experience is. And I think in terms of expectation, it simply helps them to, to hear it from a real person, which always gives a little bit more trust, I believe, which still doesn't mean it's going to be exactly the same way, but at least I believe it puts them in the direction.
Thank you, Eva. We have just 5 minutes left, so I'd like to move on. Here in the chat room, Thomas from Unknown University is asking if you can share to what extent students are looking into entrepreneurship in your region, which actually aligns with my next question, whether education is moving towards more competency-based and holistic approaches, both in schools and universities and in university admissions. And what does that look like in your practice, Eugenia? You talked about competency-based education when we first spoke. So what's your opinion on this?
So yeah, here in Uruguay, we have transitioned, our preschool, primary and secondary school education to a competency-based model, learning model. So our students need to use the content in order to develop procedures so that they can solve problems, think critically, relate well to others, and whatnot. Universities, however, at least here, have not shifted. So they're still very strongly content-based and structured. So when students are, when we hear, right, from universities that students need to be more autonomous, they need to be able to solve problems, they need to be more flexible, they need to be more adaptable, they need to manage their time, sure, but the thing is, when have they learned to do that? And so when you switch into a competency-based approach, that gives you more opportunities for students to practice and correct and attempt to do those things that I think they should still continue to learn at a university level. So in our case in particular, to sum up, because I know we don't have a lot of time, we are transitioning into that. I hope to see universities doing the same thing.
Thank you. Lucas?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, we are an IB school, so we've been fostering IB approaches to learning, which are pretty much developing skills like thinking, social communication, that will lead students to becoming more independent thinkers. Yeah, so pretty much the same. When it comes to becoming entrepreneurs, São Paulo is the business hub of Latin America, somehow mostly concentrated. So yes, our top major is business slash most of our kids want to become entrepreneurs. And I think it's a common trend for many international schools. Students apply more into business, which also leads to the question of being undecided about what they want to do. But yeah, entrepreneurship is a big major here for us. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And Andrea, how does this look on your side as an IC?
Well, in some ways, the rubber hits the pavement, because if they are in a competency-based curriculum, and they have not engaged with it enough, sometimes that's where I use a list of skills. I call them real-world skills, but I think it's real-life skills. And I ask them to find on this long list the skills they already own. and being able to talk about why an experience relates to that is very helpful. I'm happy to share that with anyone if needed to. But that transition then to be ready to really take advantage of everything EVA or universities offer is my goal.
Thank you. And Eva, how is your institution, how is CBS changing with admissions policies when it comes to more competency-based?
For the admission policies, so generally, of course, we do believe that skills and all are very important, but at the same time, I also look into what the others just said. The university system is quite stiff. And if there's going to be a change in future, there needs to be a change in order to adjust to those skills and to a changing environment as well. I strongly believe that the educational sector here will be the last one to adjust, especially on a university level. But we can see it from the high school. So what Lucas mentioned, for example, students that went through the IB system, they have much more different skills. I would even say better skills than other students, depending on the educational system they come from. So what universities can do and have to do, to sum it up, is slowly shift a little bit, get a little more flexible in terms of admission, and take into the skills and make them grow while they're in their studies, to also then focus on other skills. For example, go into entrepreneurship at some point, but those are skills that I believe we still acquire during the university level.
Thank you, Eva. Unfortunately, we have to end the session so that everybody can go to their meetings, and I don't have time for my last question, which was my favorite, but I'm going to keep that for next year. So thank you very much for the speakers and to the audience as well. And I'm going to issue during the rest of the e-conference. Thank you again and goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.